Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Freelance Teacher Videocast. I'm Doug Marola, and I'd like to also welcome you to the new school year. I hope things are going well. School year began about 2+ weeks ago, and in my line of work, I've already noticed, as I usually do, there are some young teenagers who have already self identified as independent thinkers, as young people who don't necessarily just buy into what they're told. They question everything. They think a lot. They may not be skilled in the world of literacy. Some of them have writing problems, which is usually the first thing to look for because writing isn't necessarily stressed or taught the way it should be. But it's interesting that you can see these things every year. There's a certain percentage of students who are frankly a little bit different than everybody else, and they just don't buy into stuff. And it's not that they're being inherently contrarian. They're just, maybe they're just made that way. I don't quite know where that comes from. But I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in class, keeping you up to date. We're doing a small mythology unit where we began with the mystery schools, the prehistory stories that are their myths, and it revolves around the constellations and the sun. And the interesting thing about the mystery schools is these myths echo throughout time. They were able to do amazing things in terms of time and calendar, where they understood the great year, the precessional cycle, that 25,900 year cycle of the Earth rotating on its axis. They understood this, they knew it. They had the sizes of the lengths of the time that each house or each astrological sign, that the sun is in that sign. They knew these things, even though they're seen as prehistorical, barely past hunter-gatherers. So the mystery schools are fascinating in the sense of what they did know and what they were able to figure out, and their stories are quite unique. We also did a small bit on the Osiran Cycle, and guess what? What I try to do with this recognize patterns and start to notice things and start to question what you're reading is the Osiran Cycle is almost a direct parallel to the mystery school creation myths. So you have the Osiran Cycle and you have the death of Osiris and his wife Isis. Death of Osiris, his wife Isis, then it basically gets revenge against Set, her brother, and they have, and then Osiris is reanimated, and they have a child, Horus. And these things are direct parallels, quite apparent patterns to the mystery school myths. And it's interesting how students notice these things. The Osiran Cycle also is, well, it was redone as the Lion King. The Osiran Cycle is the Lion King. Actually, the Lion King is the Osiran Cycle. It's the same story. And so I had a couple of students catch on to that when I asked them, what movie have you seen that is the Osiran Cycle? And I made fun of them of having known about it already, and they didn't say it. And some students really caught on pretty quickly. And now we're doing the myths from Mesoamerica that deal with Kukulcan and Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl, where you have the Mayan, Inca, Aztec world over thousands of years, and the worshipping of the feathered serpent, and Kukulcan and the Mayans and their monuments. Now, here's the thing. The Mesoamerican myths and the Maya, Inca, Aztec triumvirate have amazing megalith structures. They have pyramids, which is interesting simply to notice the pattern between those pyramids and the Egyptian pyramids, like we see in the Egyptian myths and the Egyptian structures that to this day are there, just like the ones in Middle and South America are still there, and they're pyramids. Now, that's an obvious connection. That's a completely easy to see connection between two cultures that in theory never connected. Yet they have pyramids, and their myths, the Osiran Cycle and the Viracocha, Kukulcan, feathered serpent myths, are also extremely similar. So I draw upon the work of people like Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval and Robert Schoch and others to mix the nonfiction element of the architectural structures, the engineering of these empires, and their myths, because they're both very similar. The patterns are wonderful and the stories are fantastic. So I urge you to look into a few things further. Take a look at Graham Hancock's work. Take a look at the myths of Egypt, the myths of Viracocha and the Middle Americans. They're fascinating stories. The history is wonderful. The stories are wonderful. And you get a mix. If you do it the way I do it, you get a mix of nonfiction when you're talking about structures and the study of history, and then the myths that surrounded those cultures as well. And that's what we're trying to do this year so far in school. And remember, we're not trying to school anybody. We're just trying to educate people, because inherent innate intelligence is a wonderful thing, and you'd hate to see it just crushed in a factory-like environment of a creative crushing, soul-killing boringness. So let's try to keep it. Me and my fellow teachers, let's try to keep it exciting. Let's do some fun things, and let's have a good school year. This is the Freelance Teacher, and I'll talk to you again.